He would follow his son and find the truth for himself, no matter how painful it might be. As darkness settled over the quiet neighborhood, James parked his car a few blocks away and waited. Through the windshield, he saw Ryan's headlights flicker on before the car disappeared down the empty road. James started his engine and followed at a distance, careful to keep the gap wide enough to remain unseen. The streets thinned as they moved farther from town, and soon the road turned into a cracked path leading into the industrial outskirts. The only sound was the soft hum of his tires and the pounding of his own heartbeat. Ryan's car stopped in front of the old warehouse, the one that had appeared in nearly every case file. Its windows were shattered, its walls scarred with graffiti. James turned off his lights and watched from the shadows. Through a gap in the wall, he saw his son carrying a box inside. A faint light flickered from within, followed by movement. The detective's instincts screamed for him to retreat, but something stronger pushed him forward. He stepped out quietly and approached the side door, peering through the broken frame. What he saw inside stole the breath from his lungs. The floor was lined with objects, photographs, torn clothing, and scraps of newspaper articles about the missing pets and strange incidents. Each item was arranged neatly, almost like a collection. Ryan knelt near the center, writing in a small notebook, his face illuminated by a single bulb. The expression he wore was cold, focused, unrecognizable. James's knees weakened as the truth crystallized in his mind. The mystery that had haunted the town wasn't the work of strangers or gangs, it had come from his own home. The realization hit him harder than any case he had ever worked. His son had become the monster he had spent his life trying to stop. James couldn't move. He stood at the doorway of the warehouse, paralyzed by the scene before him. The dim light flickered, casting shifting shadows across the walls covered in photographs and notes. Every image, every object told a story of fear and cruelty that Ryan had carefully documented. It was like stepping into the mind of someone he didn't recognize. The detective in him wanted to take photographs, collect evidence, and call for backup. The father in him wanted to erase what he had seen and protect his son from the consequences. Torn between duty and love, James felt his entire world collapsing in on itself. He stumbled backward into the cold night air, gasping as though he had surfaced from drowning. The silence around him felt deafening, the weight of truth pressing against his chest. He walked back to his car in a haze, his mind a blur of disbelief and grief. Once inside, his shaking hands fumbled with his phone. The number he had dialed countless times before as a cop now carried a pain he had never known. He hesitated, staring at the glowing screen, knowing that once he made this call, there would be no turning back. Finally, with tears blurring his vision, he pressed the digits and waited. When the dispatcher answered, his voice came out fractured, barely audible. He reported what he had found, forcing himself to give his name, his badge number, and then the suspect's identity. The moment he said the words "my son," something inside him shattered completely. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, but James could hear the shock in the silence that followed. Within minutes, units were dispatched to the location. Blue and red lights soon illuminated the warehouse like a grim stage. Officers surrounded the building as James watched from a distance, his heart aching with every movement. He saw Ryan's figure appear in the doorway, confused and frightened as officers moved in. The handcuffs clicked shut, the sound echoing louder than any gunshot. For the first time in his career, James wished he hadn't done the right thing. He wished he hadn't seen the truth. As Ryan was led away, the night swallowed the last of James's strength, leaving behind only the hollow weight of a father who had just turned in his own blood. The following days passed in a blur of headlines, investigations, and sleepless nights. News stations ran the story nonstop. Veteran detective turns in his own son. Reporters camped outside James's home, shouting questions he couldn't bear to answer. Inside, the house felt like a graveyard of memories. Ryan's room remained untouched, the bed still unmade, the desk cluttered with notebooks and sketches. Every object felt like evidence of a life gone wrong, a timeline of innocence slowly consumed by darkness. James replayed every memory in his mind, searching for the moment he had lost his son. Somewhere between the laughter of childhood and the silence of adolescence, Ryan had slipped away and James hadn't noticed until it was far too late. The department placed James on administrative leave, though most officers avoided speaking to him. Those who did offered quiet words of respect, acknowledging the impossible choice he had made. Yet their sympathy couldn't dull the pain. Each day, he was forced to relive the night in his mind, the call, the flashing lights, the sight of his son in handcuffs. He had been trained to face danger, but not heartbreak. There was no manual for this kind of loss. When the trial began, James sat in the back of the courtroom, expressionless. Ryan was led in wearing a plain prison uniform, his eyes fixed on the floor. The evidence presented was undeniable: digital records, photographs, and forensic proof linking him to every unsolved case. The prosecution described patterns of cruelty that made James's stomach turn, yet what hurt most was the lack of remorse in Ryan's face. It was as if the boy he had raised no longer existed, replaced by someone unrecognizable. When the verdict was read, the room felt unbearably still. Ryan was sentenced to decades behind bars. The sound of the gavel marked not just the end of the trial, but the end of the life James once knew. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around him, but he said nothing. Words had lost their meaning. That night, back at home, James placed his badge on the kitchen table and stared at it under the dim light. It had once been a symbol of pride and justice, but now it only reminded him of everything he had lost. Alone in the silence, he finally allowed himself to break, knowing he had done the right thing but wishing with all his heart that he hadn't. He had to.